Now we got it though. Thanks for joining me here
You got it.
and working through that with me. That was honestly, I'm going to be so much better at troubleshooting Zoom here in the future. I mean, this process is going to be sped up exponentially now. So thank you. But so how's the fall going right now? You
All's
guys
going good.
are
Going
you
very
guys
well.
finished up with team stuff or
Yeah, we're in individuals right now, and we've got about a week and 2 days before Thanksgiving, and um, then we'll take a little break after some testing, and then come back in January.
man? Yeah, that's awesome. So some teams get started super early, some teams get started super late. Do you guys normally get started at the same time every year, or have you
Yeah,
been?
we usually most of our team practice is in October,
Okay,
so we start the day after Labor Day in September with some individuals, and then go into team practice until the beginning of November, and then back to individuals until Thanksgiving, and do some testing, and then take about a month break before we start up in January.
gotcha. Have you ever thought about doing like four team practices a week and then mixing in an individual practice in there?
Yeah, yeah, we've done that.
What have you seen work the best?
Well, I for us, it's we have 8 competitions in the fall, so for us, the team practice works well in October. So my thing is in September when we start day after Labor Day, we pretty much do a lot of defensive work. So we're on the field, a lot of defensive work, trying to see what our new kids can do, and then we go into team practice, kind of getting ready for some competition, and allow our incomers to do what they do. And then November gives us a chance to go into the cages and really start breaking down some skill work with hitting. So
Hmm.
we're primarily right now doing all hitting because our field is being overseeded. So we don't
Uh,
have access to our field. So it just works out that we use this time to spend a lot of time with the offensive side of the game, and then um, take a break and come back and put it all together.
so you guys play 8 games in the fall?
Yeah.
Man, and I mean, one thing that we chatted about on LinkedIn just briefly was emotional consistency.
Hmm.
So what's like, is that kind of you seeing where they're at with the emotional consistency, and then you roll into like some strategies and techniques to help them play more consistently and not have those crazy ups and downs and riding those
Yeah.
roller coasters?
Well, I think truthfully, you know, you can't teach experience. And so for freshmen, it's really hard to know what kind of emotional stability they're going to have until we start playing. Our older kids, we've seen them in competition and in postseason. And so we have a pretty good idea of what they need to work on, whether it's trying to slow their motor down or speed it up or whatever it may be. But the freshmen are kind of tough because we won't know until we put on a uniform and play a game that's real.
Hmm. What's like one thing you teach them to kind of slow the game down?
Well, breathing. I mean, that's the big thing. I think just trying to identify each kid and what they need to do to play this game at a high level. And I think for me, a lot of it is raising the bar in practice, so that they're playing at that speed that they're going to play in a game. I mean, that's the thing that's kind of unique in our sport, is trying to duplicate that in practice because it's very difficult. And coaching the Olympic team, the one thing that I noticed with those players is that they constantly played little games with themselves to put themselves in the arena during practice, because we practiced for 4 years for one competition. Where at the college level, it's a little bit different. We have a lot more competitions, and it's um, trying to find out what each kid really needs to play the game at a high level. And so for some kids, it may be, maybe they're a slow starter that need to throw their first inning in the bullpen. For other kids, it's trying to slow things down, get a good routine where you're allowed to slow yourself down and breathe, and um, be able to have good positive thoughts, self-talk. I mean, there's a lot of things that go into it.
Hmm. I heard Roger Clemens actually talking about, I think it was before Game 5 of the World Series, that Frank Thomas asked him, he's like, man, you know what? How do you come out of the bullpen and your first pitch that you throw, it just seems like you're ready to go. Like your first pitch is the same as your 10th and your 100th. Like you bring that same energy to each pitch. And he talks about how guys might be slow starters, and he's like, if I felt like I was a slow starter that day, I would stay in the bullpen for
Mm-hmm.
an extra 30 pitches and get past that first 2 or 3 innings, so then when I come out there I can actually just throw like it's
Right.
the first inning instead of bringing my best stuff in the third inning.
Yeah,
So
yeah, I think a lot of it is just self-awareness, is knowing where you need to be as a player to play your best softball. And it's a game of relaxed skills. So you can't. It's not like football where you're going to pump yourself up to go crazy. But there's a fine line between being too relaxed and ready and relaxed. And so
mhm.
I think it's a lot of trial and error, and finding out, when you have those good moments and good performances, are you kind of logging it and documenting it and seeing what you maybe did that made a difference.
Mhm.
And so I think awareness is a huge part of it with our athletes, and they're also different. I mean, every pitcher's different, every kid's different, and it's just trying to find out how you're wired and what you need to do to play your best softball.
Yeah, I talk about that a lot because there are some players that, like, I always ask them to kind of rate themselves on a speedometer.
Mm-hmm.
Like, do they need to be up towards, like, 100 would be you bouncing off the walls, so jacked up, and then 0 would be you probably falling asleep. So
Mm-hmm.
where do you like to lie? And most of the elite athletes I talk to, they always talk about between like a 35 and a 60. And
Mm-hmm.
then there's also a lot of athletes that talk about how they have to be at like a 90 to a 95, and it's just finding out where you're at and then using the different skills and techniques and strategies you've learned to either get yourself up to that 90, or kind of calm yourself back down. If you're in a huge situation, you notice you're trembling at the plate and your adrenaline's pumping, how do you slow yourself
Right.
back down?
Yeah, we use green, yellow, red. I mean, for most players, when they're in the green, they're not thinking too much, and they're on automatic pilot. And it's being able to identify when I'm in that yellow, that I don't allow myself to go into the red, that I can get myself, and I have some tools to get myself back to the green. And yeah, it's not an exact science for all means. It's different for each kid, and um,
Hmm.
what works for one may not work for another.
So did when we got on this call, I immediately thought, man, this guy has a Ken Reviza vibe to him. Like, did you work with Ken?
And
Because
I did. I sure did.
that's
Yeah,
awesome.
Ken's been a good friend of mine for a lot of years, and I dearly miss him. But
Hmm.
just just he had a great approach, and uh, he was very knowledgeable. He understood the game, which sometimes is a little different for some people. Is they may understand the the book side of it, but have they really been in a dugout and really been through a game and seen what it's really like? And I thought Ken he had a great sense of humor, um, but he had really good ways of passing along his information to make
Hmm.
it fun for kids to work on the mental game.
Yeah, that's. I mean, I never got to meet Ken Reviza, unfortunately. I worked under Brian Kane for
Oh, yeah.
about 3.5 years, so that's kind of how I got my knowledge about Ken. And I've read his book Heads Up Baseball probably 10 times over at least. And but that is huge what you just brought up, like making it fun for the kids to want to practice the mental game,
Sure.
because especially nowadays, like kids don't want to necessarily sit down and work on their breathing, but how
Mhm.
can you make that fun? Or they don't want to sit down and necessarily visualize themselves in those big spots and work on that. So how do you make it fun? Or like, what's one way that you kind of make it interesting for your athletes?
I don't know if I make it interesting or not, but it's it's pretty individualized. Trying to get each kid to understand what makes them tick and what allows them to play their best softball. And for every kid, like I said, it's different. Some kids, it's first of all, beginning with just an awareness of what it takes um, to control the mental game. I mean, a lot of kids have never thought of it, and they keep doing the same thing over and over again, expect different results. And we know what happens there. That's the definition of insanity. So, trying to get kids to identify what are the things that good athletes do to, quote, stay in a zone or be prepared. But I think that the one thing that I've always gone back to is, and I said the emotional stability is coaching the Olympic team. I look at those kids every day and I wondered what made them so damn good at playing a game. I mean, they're the top 15 players in the world. And it wasn't their physical skill set. I mean, although that was good, but it was their emotional stability. They never got too high, never got too low. They looked the same way in a practice as they did in the Olympic arena playing for the gold medal.
Hmm.
And to me, I think that's a very unique thing for great athletes is being able to control that and being able to get yourself in that mode that you need to have to play your best softball. And we have some kids that you have to check their pulse to make sure that they are still have a heartbeat, and you have some that wear it on their sleeve. You know where they're at.
Hmm.
And so I think there's times in the game where I would tend to like the kid that is, you have to check their heart rate. Those are the kids that usually handle the tough situations a little better than the kid that's very excitable and very emotional. And that's a big part of our game. I mean, our game's a game of failure. So learning how to handle failure and being able to fail forward and not fail backwards and still be a part of a team, because I think there's one element that helps every kid, and that is to take some pressure off yourself and think about what you can do to help this team be successful. So um, I want kids that are good teammates, that are unselfish, that when things are going bad for them, that they don't internalize too much, because that makes the game even more difficult. And so I always tell kids the games are never going to be life threatening. I mean, I don't care how bad of a day you have. I can walk you across the street to the cancer center, walk you amongst a bunch of little kids that can't do anything. And it makes you kind of keep the game in perspective. And I think that's one of the big steps is most female athletes are pleasers. So they're constantly trying to please someone else, not necessarily pleasing themselves, but pleasing someone else. And so trying to be able to identify that in itself, to say, you know what, let the game come to you. You know, um, you're not going to be perfect. You don't have to be perfect to be a good player. And I think that's a big statement, is too many times kids try to be perfect all the time, and it makes it even tougher. So
Hmm.
trying to take pressure off them, and we do a pretty good job of trying to identify um, weaknesses in our athletes. So we have 5 pillars that we work with, and our first pillar is character. And I think character is the foundation for everything. I've learned a long time ago, you can have great athletes with great skills, but if they don't have character, they're not going to be a good teammate, and they're not going to do the little things that it takes to be successful. But character, attitude, and discipline are 3 things that they can control, you know. And once you are able to understand that and control that, then the consistency and the performance piece can happen. So trying to break it down to a point that, trying to make them better people, in turn makes them better players.
So when you
And
talk about creating character, does it come from like a values and a principles standpoint?
yeah, I mean, it's about, having trust. Do people trust you? Are you reliable? Are you committed to the process that we have here? Are you positive? I think positive is a big thing that you have to teach young kids, especially in this game, because they play a game that's a game of failure. So there's a lot of negativity, especially with social media now. I mean, there's so many layers that you have to go through. It was a lot different than when I played the game, and it was a pretty simple life. A black
Hmm.
and white TV, no social media, no cell phones. I mean, you look at all the luxuries that we have today, many of those things have put a lot more pressure and a lot more layers on our athletes. And so, yeah, I mean, making the right choices, pretty simple,
Yeah.
but that's a piece that I think is pretty important. And you can't overlook that when you're putting together a culture, because, when I first started coaching, I spent all my time developing skills, and I thought that was my job, right? And as I've been in this game for 45 years, I find myself today spending more time developing the culture of our team. And without a good culture, I don't care what you do, you're not going to be able to perform when it comes the big moment.
Hmm.
And for us, our goal is to win a national championship, and we know there's going to be some bumps along the way, and you're going to be on a roller coaster. And so being able to talk them through those things and try to give them some stability and know that, there's only so many things you can control those things, and then the game will take care of itself. And, so I think right now I spend more time trying to develop a culture that kids understand this is what we need to be. This is who I need to be able to play this game at a high level. That
Hmm.
starts with it.
And you guys talk about the behaviors that it takes to actually do that. So when you talk about discipline as a
Yeah.
team, and then you might ask them something like, what is a behavior that you can do that demonstrates discipline
Yeah. I
in
think,
this area?
yeah. And better than that is you need to be able to develop a picture of what it looks like. You know,
Hmm.
I think you can talk about it, you can throw a bunch of words out, but until a kid can identify and see what it looks like. And so we use teammates to say, this is a great example of discipline. Whether it was the discipline to prepare for a game, to stay in their plan. Sometimes the mental plan can come and go, because if it doesn't work, people kind of throw it to the side, but being consistent with it. And so for me, it helps more that I can identify players that exemplify these characteristics or these traits. And
Hmm.
once you can see a picture of it, then you kind of understand what it looks like.
Yeah, like that makes me think of, I work with a professional basketball team over in Iceland,
Hmm.
and their core principles are belief and excellence, aggressiveness, selflessness, and toughness. And after one of the practice, or after one of the games, we got in the locker room and we talked about some of the core values being demonstrated on the court that day. And their point guard came off of a pick really hard, really aggressively, and went towards the basket thinking he was going to score. And then last minute, he got defended and he kicked it out to the guy that was wide open on the wing, and he drained a three. So that was both being aggressive, coming off that pick, thinking he was going to score, but then also being selfless and not trying to force anything, and then
Hmm.
kicking it out. So,
Absolutely.
and that's kind of the same way that you guys go about it, it sounds
Yeah.
like.
That's
So like,
fabulous. Yeah.
what might be an example that, like you used in the last like couple weeks?
Oh, well, we have, I mean, we have a ceremony. So when a kid, so at the beginning of the year, after about 3 weeks of practice, I have a ceremony, and I have them nominate players that have exemplified the A, that, this is what it stands for. And normally the first go around, you have your core people that are no brainers. They're your older kids that have been tried and have been consistent with their approach to the game. They're probably pretty good performers. They're probably very competitive, and they do things the right way all the time. And this year we had a couple of freshmen that newcomers that came in that earned their A the very first time, which I thought, wow, this doesn't happen very often. But then once you saw them perform, you kind of see what the other kids saw in them too. And so then each week, once they earn the A, I have them go around the room and I have every kid tell the person why they've earned the A. And for a kid to hear their teammates say, you know, this is why I voted for you. You know, you're a great example of great discipline. You're always ready. You never take a rep off. You always go 100%. You're a good teammate. You put your arm around me and tell me how to do things. And so that kind of develops the culture and develops the conversations about what all this stuff looks like. And then as we get into the process, like we're still in the process right now. In fact, today, our entire team finally now has earned their A.
Oh, that's awesome.
So the next step was, okay, these 5 or 6 kids have not earned their A. So now you have to tell me what pillar are they not accomplishing, okay? And tell me why they're not getting their A. So now you make them say, well, the kid's just character's not good because she's not taking care of business off the field or whatever it may be. So then you start kind of getting a little glimpse of what the inside of this team looks like. And then I said the last time, I said, all right, now we have 5 kids that haven't earned the A. It's the job of the rest of you to help these kids earn the A. Now that you've identified their issues, now it's your job to be a leader and help them and show them the right way. Mm-hmm. This weekend, I just got everything in and everyone has earned their A. So
that's awesome. So they just you send out a kind of questionnaire form.
Out a form. Yeah.
And then they just check the box, or they each write a name.
Yeah, no, there's a name on each of them. And then they have the pillars. So they have character, attitude, performance, consistency, and discipline in each of those. So they would write a yes or a no in each of those. So character, yes, or character, no. Attitude, yes. Performance, yes. Okay, and anytime they wrote a no, they have to say why they wrote the no. Yeah, and so it really has helped me identify some pitfalls of some of our players. Mm-hmm. But truthfully, like I tell them, we're only going to be as good as that clubhouse, and if we don't take care of the culture in the clubhouse, we're going to get in the tough part of the season, and things are going to start coming apart. And so we try to have, and I tell them, you're either going to be a leader, you're going to be a follower, and you better be good at either one of those. And if you're not willing to do either, then we don't need you. Mm-hmm. And so
what's your definition of leader, or like leadership?
All of these things combined. Someone that is an example of doing things the right way all the time. It's a lifestyle. It's a choice you make. You can lead by example. It's not always about being vocal, but you have to have your vocal leaders. You have to have your leaders that are the mamas that take care of kids. But leadership to me is just a way of life. Are you willing to? I always say that you have kids that add to your program, kids that subtract from your program, kids that multiply your program, and kids that divide your program. I think leaders are the multipliers. Leaders are the ones that can bring others to help accomplish the mission, and they hold each other accountable, which is, I think, a very important part in our era right now, is getting them accustomed to someone holding them accountable. And it's not a personal attack, but it's the way we're going to accomplish our mission. And our mission is to win a national championship. And so setting the standards, holding them accountable to the standards, being consistent and doing the right thing all the time. And that's the tough part about being a leader is, you can't be a 10 one day and a 1 the next day, and
Mm-hmm.
a 6 and a 7 and an 8. You got to be a 10 all the time. And that's a challenge. Not everyone's going to be a 10 every day. I'm
Mm-hmm.
not a 10 every day, but I promise.
Yeah, I talk about. I think that it goes back to the consistency that we were talking about earlier. Like, what's your take on maybe you're not a 10 every day, but you can be a 7 every day?
Yeah.
As long as you're consistent with it. Like, I remember when I played at Indiana State, there was this guy Josh Nagel, who when you first meet him you might think he's the weirdest dude in the world, but by the time you got to know him and after hanging out with him, you're like, okay, he's just a weird dude. Like, he's my weirdo.
Yeah.
Like, but he was consistent
Yeah.
every single day. He showed up and he was the same person,
Yeah.
and that's why, like, you grew to love him. And that's exactly, it's hard when a kid or a teammate shows up and one day he's your best friend or she's your best friend, and then it seems like they hate you the next day. You're like, okay, who am I getting today? You don't want to have to flip that coin, especially as a head coach. When it comes down to when it's in the 7th or 8th inning and you need a pinch hitter, you don't want somebody that you don't know what you're going to get at the
Right.
plate. And
Yeah. And I kind of look at it as, be the best version of yourself every day. And I think that's a choice that you make when you get up in the mornings. Am I willing to do what it takes to be the best version of myself? And
I'm laughing right now because I think about that a lot and I talk about that a lot. And my alarm clock, I changed it from alarm 1. I renamed it to "Who do you want to be today?" And so that's exactly what I believe as well, is that, like, oh, looks like I lost you.
yeah,
Oh, I lost you for a second.
no, you did.
It's all good. We're back. I was actually laughing when you said that because on my alarm clock, I renamed it from alarm 1 to "Who do you want to be today?" So when I wake up in the morning, I turn my alarm off and it says "Who do you want to be today?" I remind myself of exactly that, like the
Very
goal
good.
of the day: be better today than you were yesterday, and be better tomorrow than you were today,
Yeah.
and like that. But that's like one strategy that I've used, and I talk about that, and then setting a reminder on your phone. I
Mm-hmm.
think you can set a reminder on your phone to actually go off at a specific location. So like when the kids show up to the field, uh, like one of the teams I work with, the one kid has a reminder on his phone that every time he shows up to the field, it says "Bring the day one juice," which basically means, like, bring the same energy that you bring to day one every
Right.
single day. And so it was kind of funny. I was walking last time I was there. I was walking to the clubhouse and he pulled in his car and he's yelling out the window, banging on the side of the door, "Day one, baby, day one!" And he's like, "The reminder just went off on my phone."
Well,
So
there's never a bad opening day, because number one, you don't have any baggage with you. It's a new, fresh start, and we talk about opening day feeling all the time.
oh, so you guys call it opening day? I like
Opening
that.
day. Opening day.
Yeah, that's huge. But being a leader, one of the definitions I heard, I don't know who I heard this from, or it was a long time ago, but you're a leader when anybody counts on you for anything.
Hmm.
So basically, everybody's a
Yeah.
leader on the team, and
Sure.
I think it pulls in, the whoever's 25th on your roster as well. Like, hey, we're counting on you today to give your best, because if you don't, you're not pushing us to the level that we could possibly achieve. And, like, if you're not executing the role that you have right now, then we're never going to be as good as we can possibly be.
Absolutely.
And so
Totally agree with that.
I
Yeah.
thought that was a
Especially in a
that
team
was really
sport
cool.
like us, our bench is as important as the 9 players that are on the field.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're, you have to have a buy-in, and whatever your role is, then you're going to give it everything you have, or else why you're there. They always say you're only as strong as your weakest link, and unfortunately, in championship softball or anything, you can't have a weak link. Everyone's got to be on board.
Mm-hmm. One great example of that I saw Skip Bertman do a long time ago was he had like 15 nickels, and then 2 of those nickels were bent out of shape. And so he stacked up the 13 nickels, and then he goes, listen, if we have all 13 in line, like, we can hold the 2 on top, he's like, and then you talked about multiplying and dividing your team, and he takes those 2 bent nickels and he puts them in the middle of the stack, and then it falls right apart. And he's like, if we have any of those guys that get into the middle, that get into the center of our team, it's going to destroy us.
Yeah.
And I was like,
Skip had a lot of good things.
I thought that was a really cool example, like a visual.
Yeah.
Do you use any visuals like that with your team?
We have done some stuff with the program, who I think does a really nice job of identifying leaders in your program. And so we always have a visual, and like this year, it's an or that we use during the training. And it's, as they walk into the locker room, that's what the first thing that they see is a little reminder of doing your part. And you need to be a 10 today,
So like an or, like a rowing or?
Yeah, because that was one of the activities that we did this year. Last year it was a sandbag, because they had to carry these sandbags. So they, in their locker room, was this sandbag in the middle of the locker room that they saw every day.
That's cool.
Yeah.
And have you ever read the book The Boys in the Boat?
I have not.
It's a great book about the University of Washington rowing team.
Okay.
That actually went to like the 1942 Olympics, I believe, and won when they should not have won. And it's it might be a book worth diving into, at least for a couple of chapters, just about how rowing together and whatnot with the team. I think it's really good. But that analogy is awesome. Like everybody rowing together in order to get to where you want to go. I remember when I was younger, I went out on this huge canoe with my dad, and we were stargazing, and there were 74 of us, I believe. It was a huge Native American canoe, and we were all rowing through the middle of the lake, and the wind's blowing through your hair, and you're like, man, this is amazing. But that's what it takes to win a championship, having everybody row together, because you'll not only get there faster, but you'll get there together. I think the old quote is like, if you want to get there fast, go alone. If you want to get there, if you want to go, it was this. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what that takes me back to. That analogy is a really good one, though. And then the sandbag. Did you ever have them? This is one thing I saw Texas Tech baseball do a while ago. Like if the head coach noticed that one of the guys was still holding on to like an error in the field, or he noticed that he was still holding on to an at bat like an inning later, he would go out. He would put on a weighted vest, and make him play with that one. I thought that was pretty cool as well.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah, same thing with like the mental bricks.
Mm-hmm.
At another college, Neosho Community College, their women's basketball team, so talk about like character, right? They have them carry bricks in their backpack if they aren't doing something off the field. Like say they got a C on a test or something, they had to carry a brick in their backpack for a whole week. I'm like, man, that's definitely a physical reminder right there.
Absolutely. An anchor.
Mm-hmm.
That's for sure.
But, well, I don't want to take too much of your time. I know I'd planned until only 11 today. So, thanks for troubleshooting the beginning and getting on here with me. It was great hearing about everything. Actually, one of my mentors works with your women's basketball coach. His name is Greg Warburton. Have you ever heard of him?
I've heard the name.
He works with Oregon State baseball as well.
Okay.
But he works with University.
Yeah,
Arizona basketball. So maybe next time he gets down
yeah,
there, I'll join him and
absolutely.
we
We'd
can
love to
meet.
have you out.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Okay,
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I
you bet.
appreciate it.
All
And
right,
we'll talk soon.
you bet. Take care.
See ya.
Bye bye.